We are live. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Jerry's Live. I'm your host, Mott Tuman. I'm so excited because we have a wonderful guest here. This is Jimmy Leslie. He's the resident artist for Winsor Newton and Liquin, and he's going to be talking about a new oil medium that they have, an alkyd oil medium, I believe. So really excited to share all of that with you guys. If you guys want to see any of the supplies that he shows tonight, make sure you go to JerrysArtarama.com and you type in our class code for tonight, which is going to be JL302. Type that into the search bar and it should pop up with all the materials that Jimmy will be using tonight. But let me just hand it off because he has some really fun stuff to show you guys. So I'm going to remove myself.
All right, sounds good. Thanks, Mott. Hey, everybody, good to see you guys again. If you are new to Jerry's Facebook Live, then maybe you don't know me. If you've been here before, I've been on many of these episodes. They're always a lot of fun, and we try to jam-pack them with a lot of great information. So, key thing I want to express here. Tonight, I'm going to be talking about Winsor & Newton Liquin Alkyd mediums. I'll explain what that means in a minute, all right? But I think oil painting, I'm a trained oil painter, and I think oil painting can be quite confusing. And so these are mediums that can really help us speed the drying rate and help you manipulate the oils to do what you might want to do for your aesthetic process. So I'm going to show you 5 different mediums to do that. When I do that, though, I'm going to be painting for you. So I'm going to be using the mediums. Ask questions about the mediums I'm using. Ask your questions about oil painting in general. And Mott, as you know, you can just interrupt me at any point. If you see somebody's question come in, don't think, oh, that's going to mess him up. And if it does, whatever, it doesn't matter, because we're just going to have fun and answer a lot of questions. So what I'm going to do for you guys is we'll just take a look at our overhead view here and just a few things. Obviously, we're at Jerry's right now, but these are some Instagrams. So you can check out Jerry's at JerrysArtarama. So you can see what they're up to and all sorts of great deals and inspirational artwork. And then, I just realized I made a little mistake here. So this is interesting. For Instagram, Winsor and Newton, we use an ampersand for our brand, Winsor and Newton, but it's actually AND in the Instagram. So yeah, I had my brand hat on there. So it's actually at Winsor AND Newton, not the ampersand for Instagram. And then 2 other things, at TFAC NA, that stands for the Fine Art Collective North America. That's the education program that I run for the brand. And we've got live streams there as well and little mini demos, kind of little bite-sized chunks of art materials information. And then when we're done, if you want to check out me on Instagram at Jimmy Leslie Art, and you can see what I'm up to. So let's get going though. We're going to stay with my overhead view and I'm going to come back and see you face to face from time to time. But I want to show you the surface that I'm going to be working on here. So I've got a long, tall, skinny composition right here. And this is Winsor & Newton oil and acrylic paper. So this is already a primed paper that's got a canvas-like texture. So that's kind of nice. It's got 10 sheets in here. This happens to be a 9x12. There are other sizes. But what I like about this is something that's nice if you were on the go traveling, because I could have 10 sheets in here instead of 10 canvases that might be, that thick. So I'm working on that tonight. You could take a watercolor paper and prime it with a gesso. That wouldn't be a problem. I just happen to be using this. And of course, you could be working on a canvas. I've got my tape. I don't have that in front of me, but you can see this is a little washi tape. It's a very light adhesive tape. So when we peel that off, it's not going to destroy the paper. So, okay, what is this thing that I have though? It's a bunch of just lines and mess, right? So let me show you in my sketchbook here. This is a little study for a waterfall called Bashbish Falls. And it's on the border of New York State and Massachusetts. So if anybody is in that area, it's Lenox, Massachusetts is how I got to the falls. And I was there in June. And this is just a little value study. So me just kind of thinking about lights and darks, but I'll show you in my sketchbook. I think I have 1 or 2 studies in here at least. I've got this one right here. That's a little study of the falls, sort of a similar view, but not quite so skinny. So I really love how the falls came down between these rocks here, but you can actually see in our reference photo, which I'm going to be using, here's the actual image. So it's got really strong light, dark shadows, and we're going to recreate that. But I like to kind of tackle things in my sketchbook a little bit sometimes because it helps give me a sense or an idea, I almost think of it like warming up a bit. Gives me a little bit of an idea of what I'm working towards. And then again, I've got my little value study in here. So materials wise, let's take a look at what I've got right here. And I'm actually going to flip it this way. Since I'm going to be working on this skinny image, I can have my palette right next to me here. I've got a white down here. Now I have two whites with me. These are Winsor & Newton Artist Oil Color. I have a titanium white and I have a zinc white. A zinc white is a more transparent version. It's a more transparent white, I should say. I'm going to use that. Now, I could use either one, but the one thing I want to say about titanium white, sometimes people get a little heavy-handed with that, and their colors will end up getting a little bit washed out if they get a little too heavy-handed. So if you are that kind of person, a little bit more of the transparent zinc white can be a nice way to lighten your colors, but not desaturate them so much. So I've got my zinc white down. I've got Winsor Lemon. Now our tubes, this is an old tube of Winsor and Lemon. They don't look like this anymore, but I still have paint in here, so I'm using it. Our tubes now look like this. They're cleaner, nicer. I don't mean cleaner as in, dirty and used, but just a cleaner, bolder look here. So I've got Winsor Lemon here. I've got a little bit more of an earthy Indian yellow deep right there. So I've got two yellows. Then I've got Permanent Rose. Now, Winsor Lemon and Permanent Rose happen to be what we would call our suggested primaries in the range, as well as Winsor Blue Red Shade, which is a phthalocyanine blue. So these three, Winsor Lemon, Permanent Rose, and Winsor Blue Red Shade, is what we would call our suggested primaries. And when I say that to you, what I mean by suggested primaries is they're the primaries that are going to give us our clean secondary mixes. So I've got Permanent Rose mixed with a little titanium white, Winsor Lemon tinted with titanium white, and the Winsor Blue Red Shade tinted with titanium white. And then when I take those and use the Permanent Rose and Winsor Lemon, I get this beautiful orange right here. Really nice, strong, vibrant secondary color. Then I get a really nice, deep, deep violet with Permanent Rose and Winsor Blue Red Shade. And then I get a really nice mid-tone, strong green from Winsor Lemon and Winsor Blue Red Shade. The thing I do want to say about that is that when I say these are the suggested primaries, that means they're the ones that are going to give you those clean secondary colors. Any red, yellow, and blue is a primary. And sometimes I like totally shaking it up and not using those at all. This is just if you're one of those people who's like, I don't know, what's my best route for doing this? Or maybe I'm newer to oil painting or I'm not sure about the colors. Those are good ones to start off with. So let's start slinging some paint here and talk to you about the mediums that we're going to be using, because if it's one thing I know, these sessions go quite quick. So I'm going to jump in.
Really quick, Jimmy.
Yeah.
Anne wanted to know that paper that you're using, how hard is it to cut down?
Sorry, say that again, Matt. Mott, how hard is it to cut down?
Yeah, as in if they wanted to cut it into a smaller size.
Oh, super easy. Oh yeah, no, nothing. You just, your standard scissors like that. Yeah, super easy. No big deal for that at all. You can even bend it, crease the edge, and tear it pretty easily. Yeah. Okay, so I'm gonna use this brush. This is at least one of the brushes I'm gonna use. This is a Filbert. It's a number 8 Artist Oil Synthetic Hog brush. So rather than a natural hog, this is a beautiful synthetic that we've come out with in the last year. And then I've tested a lot. This might seem like a big brush for something like this right here, but it's because I want to work rather quickly. And I'm going to keep bringing this image in and out of here, but I want you to notice this little section of sky up here. That's what I'm going to begin to lay in first. And I'm going to take my first medium here. So this is Liquin Original. So now this particular variety of Liquin dates back to about 1963. Liquin is a brand name for Winsor & Newton. So you're not going to find Liquin in another brand. But what it is, it's called an Alkyd medium alkyd. So let me pour it out first. And it takes a little bit of a tap to get that out of there. There we go. It's sort of a medium viscosity to it. And you can see it's got a little bit, not too much, but a little tiny bit of a gel-like consistency. And then you move that around and that gets quite fluid. So what we have here is when I say the word alkyd, okay, what is that? What the heck does that mean? Because some of you maybe, I just don't know what that means. So I'm going to take a little bit of my white and I'm going to take a little bit of cerulean blue over here. And this can loosen that up because out of the tube, oil paint's quite thick. So an alkyd, A-L-K-Y-D, A-L-K-Y-D. So it comes from two words, really, alcohol and acid. So it's an oil medium. It's an oil, right? Just like the oil that's in your paint that's modified to be able to speed the drying rate by 50%. So modified to be able to speed the drying rate by 50%. So when you are using your oil colors, and what you'll notice is they probably take, and I'm just making a lighter green now here, using that blue that I already have. And I'm using a little bit of this color right here, Mineral Green Deep. This is one of our newest colors to the Artist Oil Color range, Mineral Green Deep. And I'm going to come in here and just begin to block in these tree shapes. So I'm telling you, the liquid medium is treated with an alcohol and acid base by the chemist to be able to dry at a very quick rate. Now, if you take a look at your oil colors on your palette, they're going to dry anywhere from about 2 days to 2 weeks. They're going to take to dry to the touch. 2 days to 2 weeks. Now that's going to depend on the color you're using. So real quick here, I'm just trying to really block in my biggest shapes. What I want to do here is get this very triangular shape of the sky. And then you can see here, I'm getting this tree shape over here. And then I want to get the deeper, darker shape down there. So really just thinking about these big organic shapes to begin with. So one of the things that you can do, because you might say to me, well, Jimmy, how do I know? You just told me that my oil paints will dry roughly in 2 days to 2 weeks to the touch. How do I know? How do I know which ones will do what? So my suggestion to you, the thing that I always like to tell people is take a little bit of your colors, and I'm going to come back to you face to face for this just a second, just to illustrate. What I would say is take a swatch of your color, a thin swatch of it, just, almost quite as thin as you can get, thin enough to not leave a brush stroke really. And put each little swatch down on a canvas or whatever surface it is you're working on. So if you've got 9 colors that you normally use in your palette, put down a swatch of each one of those. And then simply do a touch test every day. And you're going to have to get your hand a little bit dirty there. You can use a brush. But go through, and then on day 2, is anything setting up? Now, if you're using a yellow ochre, you'll probably see that the yellow ochre is starting to set up. That's probably going to do that. If you're using an alizarin crimson or maybe something like an ivory black, those pigments need more oil when those paints are being made to make a paint, to make a usable paint. So if a pigment needs more oil, one pigment needs more than the other, that means that's going to be a color that's going to take longer to dry. But that's a great way to do it, because it's hard to give you a blanket statement because you all might be using different colors. So that's my suggestion to you. Go through, do a touch test, but also do this. Make a note of what the environment is in your studio setting, wherever your studio is, whether that's your actual studio like mine here, or whether that's a bedroom you're painting out of, or whatever it might be. And then you can, if you know that atmosphere, that'll kind of help you. And then you can also, write down the time that you did it, when you made that swatch of color and what's happening, and that'll kind of help you do that. So if we have this Liquin Original that I'm using, and it's simply called Liquin Original because it's the first one we made. And I'm going to show you some other varieties here in just a moment. Like I said, it's about a medium viscosity. So if you've got a color that normally takes 2 weeks to dry, that's going to speed it up. And that paint's going to dry to the touch in about 7 days. And that can be really, really quite useful. And I'm going to come down here and continue getting the rest of these tree shapes. Since I have green on my brush already, I'm going to come down here and you can see right here where it's very dark. That's where I've got these hatching marks here. So I know I need to be quite dark there. I'm going to darken up some of this green with a little bit of the Winsor blue red shade, which is again a phthalo blue. I'm actually even going to add a little bit more of this permanent rose to it. That's going to make it a bit darker, almost like a violet, but it's going to appear as a very dark, dark mass there. It's not going to look very, very violet unless I add a little white to it. So I'm just going to get that in there. That's going to, because I know this area down here needs to be darker than other areas that are happening here. So I'm just going to come in there and be able to get that going on.
And Jimmy, can you remind us what color you used for the sky?
Yes, I did. Yeah, I used the zinc white Mott, and I used cerulean blue there. Cerulean blue is a lovely, you know, I say sky color, but what does that even mean? Sky, saying sky color is like saying skin tone or skin, whose, and the sky on what day. But if we're thinking of that, like here, I'm in New Jersey, we've got that, you know, beautiful sort of baby blue sky today. You know, I guess our stereotypical, really great day. And that cerulean blue is lovely for doing that. It can be a little bit of a warmer blue. And sorry, I'm getting my solvent out here. So I've got my little jar with my little coil, and I'm gonna rinse off my brush. What I want to do before I do that, I always really wipe I try to use as much of my the color on my brush in the painting, and then I really try to clean it off with a rag first. That way I'm not, you know, getting as much you know, dirty waste solvent here. And the solvent that I happen to be using right now is this one right here. This is Winsor & Newton Sansador. So if we break down the name, Sans Odor, it's a low odor mineral spirit. Whenever you hear, whether it's Winsor & Newton and it's Sansador, or whether it's another brand, when you hear low odor, please don't think that still doesn't mean you shouldn't have ventilation. All right, it's low odor. Doesn't mean you want to lock the door of an 8x10 room and breathe things in. You know, people can get when we talk about art materials and ventilation and things like that, people can develop sensitivities over time. So we don't ever want you to do that. So always have some good ventilation. That'll be quite helpful. Okay, so I'm going to quickly move with this brush. Come down in here, and I want to begin to fill in areas quite quickly. And I'm going to take some of that cerulean blue again and a little bit of the zinc white. And what I'm noticing is we can look at something like the waterfall itself and we can say, well, that's white. Okay, well, I get why someone would say that. But if we look at the waterfall here and say it's white, well, then what's this? And then you might say, well, it's a lighter white. Okay. But if we do this with white, how are we going to get any lighter? So we can't think of that as pure white. We have to really look at comparisons of what's around it. So I'm going to take a little bit of that cerulean blue and I'm going to come in and I'm going to block that waterfall in like this. Then I can lay other colors on top of it, and I can get other pure whites if that's what I feel on top. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you something here. I'm going to raise my camera up quite high because I'm going to show you a bigger painting here, a bigger version of this. So this painting, oh, I got to go real high here now. This painting is about 1 foot. It's not that big, really. Just it's huge compared to this. It's about 1 foot across by 2 feet long. So this is a good example when I show you this. Look at my waterfall here. I've got this pale blue in here because then when I get down here where the sunlight's hitting or little areas that are splattering here, I can get a little bit more pure white and it jumps and it stands off of there. So I've got this I've got here a more narrow view of this where we're only really getting sort of this side over of the waterfall. This side is not in our composition that we're working on here. So this is really what we're dealing with. But it's the same kind of thing. I'm dealing with this triangular shape. I'm dealing with the mass here, lighter areas, tree, and then all the beautiful colors that occur down here. And what you'll notice here is I worked on you can see it from the side. I worked on this magenta color, this magenta ground that I put down. And I decided with this one, and I'm going to bring it back down close now. I decided with this one, what I would do is I would work on this sort of teal ground that I had right here that would give us a little bit of a cool sort of feel of the water. I kind of like the way that looks. So we're gonna go with that. And we're gonna do this. We'll move this over a little bit, clean off my brush, and we'll work on this rock shape right here. So the Liquin Original that we first have that I'm working with is really quite nice for loosening your paint right out of the tube. And you might ask, well, why can't I just use the Sansador that I just had to clean off my brush, the low odor mineral spirits? Why not just use that? Well, you could. That's absolutely possible. That is something that you could do. My only concern with that is that sometimes you can get a little bit too liberal with the solvent. And when you get a little bit liberal with the solvent, what starts to happen is that you can thin out your paint so much that it has trouble adhering to the surface. And we don't want that to happen, right? We don't want that to happen. So I'm going to show you an example. If I look at this, this is an example of taking too much solvent and using that. And you can see that doesn't leave a great paint film. This is where I used a lot of solvent and I thinned my oil paint almost to the consistency of watercolor, which you never want to do. And that's why that just doesn't look beautiful. Pigments have started to settle out of the paint. It doesn't have a beautiful glossy surface. Now, the opposite of that would be using way too much oil right here. And then this actually, because we're using so much oil in this mix, it actually looks like, and this was linseed oil, it actually looks like when oil spills maybe from a car leak. And what's happening here, it's bunching up as it dries, so it's raising off the surface. Here, when you have too much solvent, the pigment is just being spread out. And again, this has a nice shine to it over here, right? It's got a beautiful glossy shine, but all of this is gathered up. So there's space under here from the surface to the top of this where it's gathered. Here, it's spread out. Neither one of these is going to be good for long-term adhesion. So you want to be careful about that. And the beauty of using something like the Liquin Original that we have here is it's a ready-to-go medium. So it's a mix of the solvent and the oil that's been treated with the alcohol and acid. Again, hence the name alkyd, right? So al from alcohol, the last part of it, the suffix alkyd from acid, alkyd. And then what that'll do is that's going to speed that drying rate again. And so we can do this as well. Let's say you're somebody who says, okay, that's great, Jimmy, but I really like a super fluid paint. I just love it to be super, super fluid. Okay, so there is this one called Liquin Fine Detail. Liquin Fine Detail. And watch what we notice when we pour this out. That's going to pour and spread very, very quickly. And just for comparison, let's take the Liquin Original again, which is what I started using. See that's got a little bit more of a gel-like consistency. Now, when I move it around, it starts to thin out more, for sure. But you can see a clear difference between those, especially if I do this and I tilt my surface. You can see that fine detail. So anybody who loves to get a tiny, tiny brush in their mix, a really tiny one, and make marks like that, So let's take a little bit of paint. This is transparent orange. I can really thin that out. But because I'm using the oil, I'm not at risk, like if I use that much solvent. I'm not at risk of having an adhesion problem. So I can get really, really quite loose like that. And then let's say you're somebody who definitely likes a little bit more of a gel-like consistency. Maybe you are working on a portrait and you don't want something this runny, like the fine detail sliding down the surface as you're working. We can use light gel. And this even more so than Liquin Original. I've got to really, I'm gonna have to really watch. I'm gonna have to really tap now. Really, really tap. Actually, what I'm gonna do, there we go. It's starting to come out. And I'm actually, yeah, you can see that comes out as a really strong gel. And what I'm actually gonna do, I'm gonna take my palette knife, make sure it's cleaned. Yeah, and you can see that difference right there. So let's just review that real quick here. You've got the Liquin Original, so a little bit of a gel consistency. You've got fine detail, absolutely going to be really thin like water almost. And then you've got light gel, which has got this definitely more gel consistency. And as we work into the gel, we can move it around. And let's mix it with some paint. I'm going to mix it with, let's mix it with Permanent Rose. Once I move it around, it's still going to maintain a gel-like consistency, but you can see it's getting more homogeneous, right? So what happens, I'm going to throw a fancy term at you here. This is a fancy science term. It's called thixotropic. So thixotropic. Oh, should I spell that for you? I feel like I'm in a spelling bee. It's like you ever see those spelling bees and they're like, can you use that in a sentence? So this Liquin light gel is thixotropic. So it's T-H-I-X, thixotropic, thixotropic. Your toothpaste is thixotropic. So when you squeeze out your toothpaste, it's a gel-like on your brush. What happens? You start moving it around in your mouth and it becomes much more fluid like this. And if we were to let this sit here, it would gel up again. All right. So this is what we're looking at here. And let me put the cap back on so I don't mistakenly knock that all over the place before I get back to my painting. If we're looking at Liquin Original here on the over here, light gel in the middle, and fine detail here, these are all making your oil paint dry 50% faster than it would if you did not use them. The difference is it's all about your aesthetic choice. So here's the key thing, guys. And I always, if you've watched these episodes before, you've heard me say this before. Let me move my camera down there a little bit. You'll have heard me say this before. When we're talking about mediums, in anything, we're talking about oil right now, but if we were talking about watercolor mediums or we were talking about acrylic mediums, a medium is something that you're adding to the paint to change its natural characteristics to meet your needs. So that's really important, right? That's why I might use the Liquin Original, but you go, no, Jimmy, I like that. I like that really loose, runny feeling. I'm more for the fine detail. Or there's somebody in between us who goes, nah, I like that more gel. Now, here's what we can also do. Let's go back to our overtop view here, because maybe there's somebody else who says, yeah, great, all nice. I like really thick impasto marks. So we've got Liquin Impasto. And what are you going to notice right away? This comes in a tube. All right. So this is a thick gel. I do want to say this, though, before I move on to that. These jars right here, these are our newest jars that we have for the mediums. So for all the Winsor and Newton oil mediums and watercolor mediums, we have now these new plastic bottles. The oil ones have the green on the label. Watercolor has blue. These are all using recycled plastic. So prior to this, it was virgin plastic. And what we've done, and I'm going to have to look off to the side because I do have a note to give you an exact number on this. What we've done is we have changed these to use at least 50%, plastic, recycled plastic. And that's reducing Yeah, that's reducing 248 tons that would normally go into a landfill from what we actually make, the amount of product that we actually make. So these are all now things that are kind of part of our sustainability journey to try to make sure that we're developing either new products using a sustainable mindset, or taking a products like we've had, like the Liquin bottles, or our other drying oils, solvents as well, varnishes, and again the water mediums, watercolor mediums, and making sure that those are recycled plastic. So that's kind of good news. It's one of the ways that I kind of make decisions that when I'm buying things myself is the sustainability factor. So let's take a look at Liquin Impasto. So when I squeeze this out, yeah, that's full on gel, right? So let's take a look at something. Why would I do this? Well, you would do that because you're an artist who likes an impasto brush stroke. So let me clean off my palette knife again. And let's do this. I'm going to take my tube of paint. I'm going to take this mineral green deep. So let's say I like to work quite thick. Okay. I can squeeze out that much paint. Now, you know, that's a lot of paint. That's expensive to do that. So let's not do that. Let's just take part of that and let's mix it over here. And this is very, very thick gel. I wouldn't call it like peanut butter. It's not that thick, but it's definitely thick. And the nice thing about it, what I really love about Liquin Impasto is it does not, and you can notice this, look at this when I bring it close. Look how it is not really changing the color at all. That's really amazing. So I can get that thick. Now you might say, well, yeah, hey Jimmy, it's of course, when I squeeze out that amount of paint, that's a lot of paint. Of course, that's expensive. But what about when I'm squeezing out a lot of the Liquin Impasto? But as I say with all mediums, remember, if this was a tube of 200 ml color, that'd be quite expensive. But when you're using a medium, it doesn't have the pigment in it, which is the most expensive component in your paint. So dollar for dollar, a medium that doesn't have the pigment in there is going to be much cheaper. So that's a great way for you to save money if you're painting thickly, is you can use that. And what you'll notice is when we look at, and I need my reading glasses for this. So when we look at this, what you'll notice about it, it says it speeds drying, right? And it says it's semi-gloss, and it's going to retain very, very crisp textures. So it's the peak that I have here. That's how, well, let's turn it to the side a little bit so you can see that. The peak that I have there, that's going to stay. That thickness and that peakiness to it is going to stay. Now, if I compare that, we also have one more, right? So again, reviewing here, Liquin Original, Liquin Light Gel, Liquin Fine Detail, and Liquin Impasto. And we also have Liquin Olio Pasto. So Liquin Impasto is what we just used. And if you take a look at Olio Pasto, we'll say, yeah, speed's drying again, but instead of semi-gloss, this is semi-matte. So if you're somebody who likes a little bit more of a matte look to it, Olio Pasto is going to be great. And it levels slightly. So it's not going to have as quite as high of that peak that we have with the Liquin Impasto. You can actually see when we just put it out on its own right here, it's got a more rounded sort of look to it and a little bit more, it's not quite as high gloss. So let's just take our palette knife again. And I'm going to clean it off to the side here. Always making sure I'm doing that. And just take a little bit, right? So we're just taking just a fraction of that. And we'll mix it in. And again, I just find these are my favorite, the Olio Pasto and the Impasto. And they're my favorite because of just what we had happen again, that it's not changing the color. To me, that's kind of miraculous. Now, I've been with the company for 15 years. When I knew about these mediums, prior to working with the company, I had used Winsor and Newton oils, and I had used things like stand oil and cold pressed linseed oil. but I really didn't use the liquids. And when I first started experimenting with those, I was blown away by the concept that it didn't change the color that much. But also, those are also going to speed the drying rate by 50%. So know that if you're to go to Jerry's after this, you go to the site and you look at all the Winsor Newton liquid mediums, top thing is you're buying them because they're cutting down the drying rate by 50%. That's the key thing. So my thing, if I'm talking to another artist, right? And they say, hey, Jimmy, you know about oils. I want to pick your brain here. I know oils dry slow, but I really want them to dry slow. What should I use? I'm not sending you to the liquid mediums. I'm going to then send you to something like safflower oil. I'm going to send you to something like stand oil. That's a little bit of another topic. Those are drying oils based on linseed oil. Or the stand oil is based on linseed oil, and then safflower comes from the safflower plant. Those are super slow drying. So I wouldn't send you to the liquids. But if you are, again, somebody goes, hey, Jimmy, I'm going out to plein air paint, right? So I was at the plein air convention in Colorado. I'm going to grab a painting right here. And I was working, let's go back overhead view so you can see this a little bit closer. I was working, well, I should say, I was working plein air. I was working plein air part of the time. This was not a plein air in Colorado. This is Italy. But I was doing this Winsor and Newton. I was there. We had a booth at the trade show. So I was painting this on site. Look at the thick applique. I was using Liquin Impasto on this. This was a little scene in a place called Camogli, Italy. It's on the Italian Riviera. And this was a little fun market that my wife and I would go to buy fresh fruits and stuff. So this all started to set up in the 5 days that I was there so that I could ship it back. I didn't have to worry about it being wet at all. And likewise, while I was in the booth, I got to work on this one too, which was these beautiful cliffs. And if I turn this on its edge, you can see here's the palette knife with Liquin Impasto right here. And I was using a little bit of zinc white and a little bit of yellow ochre. So these thick marks were still setting up in like 2 days. And that seems kind of crazy to me that a thick application would do that. So I think that's just really quite amazing. You can see I got thicker areas down here as well. So I was using the Liquin Impasto, which has got more of a semi-gloss. So it's not super high gloss. And I could get all those beautiful marks. And I'll show you one more here. Pardon me while I reach.
While you're getting that, Jimmy,
yeah,
we've had a couple questions about mixing in the liquid medium.
Yep.
Rhiannon wanted to know, does it yellow at all over time?
Yeah, first of all, Rhiannon, great name. That's fantastic. Somebody's a Fleetwood Mac fan in the family, I hope, because that's an awesome name. I love it. No, you're not going to have yellowing with that. That's the beauty of these things too. And it's a smart question, right? Because to me, here's the thing. And a little behind the scenes, Mott and I were speaking beforehand, before we went on live. And we were just it was like a little session between two artists going, oh, there's those times when we struggle to make good artwork, and then we're in our heads about it and stuff like that. So to me, the last thing in the world I want to do, struggle, make artwork. Yes, I got it. It's awesome. I love it. I'm feeling good about it. And then something yellows later on. So no, these are archival. And that's kind of the nice thing that I found in my 15 years working with the company is that I get to know the chemists. So it's not one of these things like, I'm on the second floor and then there's these people up on the 20th floor I never see or anything like that. Now, the chemists are over in Le Mans in France, but I visited the factory. I know them. I can get on the phone with them and talk to them regularly or send an email. And that's always their marching orders, if you want to call it that, whenever they develop a product, is let's make sure it is something that's going to last and stand the test of time. So good question. Mott, throw another question at me, and I'm gonna sling some paint down here on the surface while I answer. So I'm gonna go back to the overhead view.
Yeah, Rhiannon also wanted to know, does it affect the transparency of the oil at all?
Yeah. So good question. So Rhiannon, with the Olio Pasto And with the impasto, no. Those are, again, very thick gels that are not really going to have that effect. With the fine detail, the original, Liquin Original, and with the light gel, those are going to increase transparency. So yeah, smart question. So that kind of brings you to this other sort of, I said I was going to go to the overhead, but I'm going to come back here for this. Rhiannon and everybody else, that sort of, I want you to go on, like when you go to the Jerry site and you buy something, what I don't want you to do, I don't want you to buy the wrong thing, because that's just incredibly frustrating. It's horribly frustrating, right? And so what you should do is, Jerry's will, when they list stuff on their website, or if you're at the store, maybe you're at the store, look at the packaging then. Packaging has all the information on it, but definitely on the Jerry's website or on the Winsor and Newton website, when you go to the products, everything's listed there. It's super, super clear. And I like that, because again, you're going to be going to the liquids because you're like, oh, I heard Jimmy say it's 50% faster. If that's not what you want, don't get them. Don't get them. I don't want you to go buy it and then go, oh my gosh, why is this drying so fast on me? No, don't do that. But if that's the camp you're in, where you want to speed the drying, then you say to yourself, okay, who am I? I'm going to throw, big names everybody knows out there. Am I more of a Van Gogh person, right? With the aesthetic that I like? Well, then you don't want fine detail. You don't want light gel, and you don't want Liquin Original. You want the Olio Pasto or the impasto. You want those. And then those are not going to increase the transparency. And that's probably something that's not a concern for you if you're painting in an impasto manner anyway, right? That's not usually the case. Now, if you're somebody more like, no, I don't fall in that camp of aesthetic. I'm a Vermeer. Oh boy, that's such a lofty one to say, isn't it, Vermeer? Couldn't. How bad, Mott, if we were all Vermeer, right? But you get what I'm saying. If you're somebody like, I don't want a brush stroke to show at all, you're probably going for light. You're probably going for the fine detail. That's probably the camp you're in. And I hope that makes sense. And if it doesn't, let me know and I will reframe that for you. But I'm going to get my image out here over again and try to sling a little bit more paint down here.
Yeah.
While we talk about these.
We had 2 more questions right now.
Yep.
Mary wanted to know, do they work at all with water mixable oils?
Oh, that's a great question. And I don't even know if we've ever done, I know you guys might have done this. I don't know if I've ever done a water mixable session with you guys, which, maybe requires its own thing at one time. So sorry, what was the name too, Mott?
Mary.
So Mary, great question. You could, notice how I'm saying this, Mary. Notice the trepidation in my voice here as I say this to you. You could use them with a water mixable oil. However, what's going to happen is you are going to reduce the water mixability of that oil by introducing it into it. I hope that makes sense. So Winsor and Newton makes what's called artisan water mixable oils. And I'm getting a little bit more of a pale violet down here for these foreground rocks that I have in my image. And so Mary, the artisan water mixable oil colors, those have specific water mixable mediums that you can use with them. So, and that will not inhibit that water cleanup that you would likely want to have if you're using water mixable oils. So yeah, you can use them with them, but then you're going to lose the water mixable point. And then that's kind of like, I kind of look at it like, well, then why bother at that point, right? Yeah, I hope that's clear.
Yeah, and then finally, we had a couple people ask how Liquin would work with fat over lean.
Oh yeah, good question. That's a very, I love questions like that because it's a really intelligent one. So it's the best way to describe this. Okay, so if we were talking about what I would not do, and this would stand to reason just in general, if I started my painting with either Liquin Impasto or Olio Pasto, I wouldn't then go put a very thin layer of fine detail on top of that. And I want you to think about this, everybody, and pardon me if this is something you're already aware of, but I think it bears repeating since that is a really intelligent question. Fat over lean, the two other ways you think about fat over lean are thick over thin or more flexible over inflexible. So what I want you to think about here is when you're using the liquid mediums, the more of it you're using, yes, if you're using a larger percentage to the oil color out of the tube, then that's getting successively fatter, right? So what I'm doing here and what I did with my other little paintings that I shared before with these, I started with these out in the blocking phase like I am with this painting down here using the Liquin original because that was thinner. And then I'm getting fatter by adding that thicker gel on top of it. So that's what I did when you saw the close-up view with my palette knife marks there. So think of it not just as fat over lean, but thick over thin. Because if you start to get too thick of a layer and put a thin one over top of that, that thin layer is going to start to dry faster just by nature of it being thinner, right? Even though these are fast drying mediums, just by nature of having something very thin, it's just like the thinner you cut a piece of meat or a piece of chicken or anything, vegetables even, right? The quicker they're going to cook. So think about this. Oil paint dries by oxidation. It needs oxygen. It takes on oxygen. So if you have a thicker layer and then you put a faster, thinner layer on top and that dries, it's going to inhibit oxygen from getting down to that thicker layer that's struggling to dry. I will tell you this, though. This is just another tip that again, because I don't, I'm not in front of you guys speaking to you face to face, in person. You may not know this. If you want an oil painting just in general to dry, let's say right now you were working on an oil painting today and you weren't using liquids, but you're like, I want this thing to dry faster. Put it in a window where it's getting sunlight all day long and it's going to get that heat from there. That's going to speed up your drying rate a whole lot. It's going to speed up that oxidation process. And again, one of the ways you can test that, if you're just kind of curious, is once again, put a swatch down on a canvas of whatever color. Put another swatch down on another piece of canvas. Stick one in the dark, face it towards a wall away from the light, stick it in a closet, stick the other one in a window where it's getting sunlight and it's getting heat from that sunlight. Check those two. It's going to be a dramatic difference. It's a really huge, huge difference, right? So that's just a little tip if you're really trying to get something to speed up there a little more. I also want to share something else with you. I have a book. I told Maude I was going to share this. I'm going to go overhead here. So much to talk about with all this stuff that I apologize. I want to get a little bit more painting done for you in our last few minutes. This is a birthday present I recently got for my son. It is by the music producer Rick Rubin. So some of you may know Rick Rubin, some of you may not. If you look him up, he's worked with pretty much everybody in the last 40 years, from Justin Bieber to Metallica and everybody in between. And he has this book called The Creative Act, A Way of Being. I am really quite in love with this so far. I am about a third of the way through it so far. And I just want to tell you two things that have really kind of stuck in my head because I think it can be helpful. One, and I actually wrote this on my studio door on the outside of it, so I see it when I walk in the door. He has a line in the book that said, adversity is part of the process. I love that. Things don't always go the way I want them to go. That's what Mott and I were talking about beforehand, before we went on. They don't always work out, right? So if I know that, and I know, no, that's okay. We're doing something here that doesn't have a step-by-step process to it, right? It's not paint by numbers. It's not. Adversity is part of the process. Accept that. It's a lot easier to deal with. I at least think it is. And it relates to something else I found in the book. There's a little section on self-doubt. This was really key to me. This was sort of a revelation. What he said in there was There's a difference between doubting yourself and doubting your work. Okay, let's explain that a little further. If you're doubting yourself and you're in your head going, I can't do this, I'm no good, I'm not good enough, that's going to lead to helplessness, hopelessness, and probably despair. If you're doubting your work, what it might lead to is, you know what I need to do? I need to go take a walk around the block. I need to come back. Let me look at this with fresh eyes. Let me come back tomorrow. Let me maybe rework it. Let me show it to a friend. Let me compare it to something else that I know I'm working towards. And that might lead to excellence, right? So don't doubt yourself. Doubt the work if you need to. That's okay. Have a critical eye, as long as what you're doing when you're doubting the work is not looking at it and going, that's terrible because I did an awful job. No, now you're back in the self-doubt camp there, right? So I hope that's useful to you. And again, I'll go back to my overhead view here. I'm not getting any kickbacks for the book. I'm just really enjoying it. But the creative act, a way of being, and it's brief little chapters, you know, so, and you can see I've been highlighting stuff. So it's yeah, that's a good one. I hope somebody gets a little bit of inspiration out of that. I think the book was new in January, and like I said, I got it as a lovely little gift. So it was kind of fun. Mott, do we have any other questions? Because we've had some good ones.
We had Rihanna asked another question about fat over lean. She asked if her canvas is oil primed, could she use fine detail liquid as a grounding layer with paint? Would it still make it archival?
Yes. Yes. Okay. Yeah. No, I had to think about the question for me. I had to kind of, wrap that around my head around that a bit. Yeah. So here's the thing, man. When I started using like the Liquin Original right there, like I said, sometimes now I used to be a college art professor years ago before my, working with Winsor and Newton and such. And one of the things that I would see sometimes happen in the class is a student would, again, in this early stage like this, they would thin out their oil paint to the consistency of watercolor to begin to block in. I get the idea. I get the concept. I understand what they're trying to do and trying to get the thicker paint moving around much more quickly. But again, the problem is we can have a paint layer that wants to separate because it doesn't have enough flexibility because we're breaking apart the oil. Because remember, whatever solvent we're using, the solvent's going to thin the paint, but it's also something we use to clean our brushes. So I use very, very little solvent in the actual painting process itself. That's where I want to jump in and I want to use a medium. So if you're in that early stage and you're blocking in, if I'm understanding your question, I think I am. If you're in that early stage of doing that, by thinning out with the medium, you're adding oil, right? This is an oil-based medium. So you're adding oil into it. You're adding some of the flexibility into the paint. So that's actually a smart thing to do. Now, I don't want anybody to think, hey, I saw Jimmy the other night on Facebook Live with Mott, and oh my gosh, I can't use any solvent in beginning a paint. No. You can, but just limit it. Don't treat oil paint like watercolor, if that makes sense, because it's not. It's oil paint. So we don't want you to do that. We don't want you to thin it and compromise the paint film. Good question, though. I like these questions. I feel like, gosh, there's so much when you start doing this. Now, one thing I'll say about this right now, because there's a lot of talking to answer your questions and a lot of explaining what's going on with the mediums. I've got everything blocked in at the moment. That is, to me, a key thing. And quite frankly, it's probably all been done in about 12 minutes if we take the talking out of it. I'm always reminded of a professor of mine back in graduate school at the New York Academy of Art, who said, Jimmy, well, he wasn't just talking to me. I guess I heard it in my head that way, but he was talking to the whole class. And he said, I want your paintings to always feel as if they're complete. Okay. And that was kind of, again, one of those moments where you're like, what? Okay, what does that mean? He wanted them to feel complete. So what he didn't want us to do is work on this rock formation over here to the left of the waterfall to perfection, get it exactly as we wanted it. And then, and that's the only thing we work on, and then start working here and finish that and then start working here. Because a lot of this is all about relationships, right? When we see color, we're seeing color compared to the other colors that are adjacent to it. And you know already, right? You know, if you're dealing with a small room and you painted a very dark color, it makes it feel smaller, right? So you know that color has that effect to change the way a space looks. It has the change too. If I've made a section of a painting as light as I can possibly make it, given the materials that I have, then my other choice is to make something extremely dark next to it to make it feel lighter, or vice versa, right? So to me, the concept of having this all blocked in means that I can start to make decisions. And usually what I do is I walk away at a point like that. If I'm in my studio in a normal situation where I'm not, yammering on the whole time like this, what I'm doing is I block in and then I stop what I'm doing for just a little bit. And I clear my senses, right? Our eyes get tired very, very, very quickly. And then what they do is they get so saturated with a color that we can't see it anymore. You guys know this effect when you've been out in the sun, maybe, especially if you haven't had sunglasses on and there's been a strong, strong glare. What happens when you turn away from the sun? You'll notice you see the opposite of orange. You might see a little halo of a blue dot or something like that. Why? Because your eyes have been so saturated by the yellow orange of the sunlight that the cones of your eyes can't take that color in anymore. So it sees the complementary color to that. So the same thing would be, go put a dot of green down on a piece of paper, stare at that thing for a minute and look at another piece of paper. You're going to see a red dot, right? So know that that's happening when you're painting. When you are looking at colors, your eyes are getting so saturated with those colors that it's hard for them to see. They get super tired quickly. And what happens, I find, we get frustrated and then we hammer on at it and we keep going. That's the time to stop. Whenever you're at an impasse, this is not the time, I believe, with art, when you're at an impasse or when you're frustrated, it's not the time to forge ahead. It's not the time to, the old thing people say, just put your boots on and get down to it, get to the job, work harder. No. That's the time to go take a walk, get out in nature, let things kind of kick back and relax, and then come back and assess what you're doing. Mott, I know we're up against the clock. Do we have any more questions?
Yes. Anna wanted to know how well these work with oil paints that are based in other oils, such as ones with alkali, refined linseed, poppy, and walnut oils.
Yeah, you could still use them with those. Absolutely. That's not a problem. So, and again, this is probably another session we could do at another time. With Winsor and Newton, we make a cold pressed linseed oil, which actually is what's in some of the paints I'm using. In some of the whites, we use a safflower oil because safflower is paler. And it won't influence the whites like a more yellow cold pressed linseed oil would. So yes, you could use them with paints made with those other drying oils. That's absolutely possible.
Great. And I think we've gotten all of them. I want to remind everyone, if I've missed your question or if you have other questions for Jimmy, I will be going back through them for the next day or so and getting all of them. And I'll make sure to message Jimmy if there's any of them that I don't know the answer to. So we'll make sure to get you all. But do you have anything else to share with us, Jimmy?
No, I'm gonna. This is a little painting I'm gonna work on, so I will be sharing that on my Instagram. And if you are following me there, sometimes what people will do is they're following me there and they have a question, and then all of a sudden I get a second direct message, and they're like, "I'm so sorry, this is your personal account. I didn't mean to ask you an art-related question, like a business." No, that's cool. I love answering questions. I love helping people. I love giving the information that I sometimes wish that I was given by teachers. I had some great teachers, but sometimes there's things that people neglect to tell you. And I'm like, I wish somebody told me that, or I wish they encouraged me more with that. So I get a great sense of joy of doing that with you guys. So yeah, please ask your questions away, and please join us again.
Yeah, thank you all so much. Oh, I got to get myself back up here. Okay, there I am.
There we
Okay,
go.
thank you guys so much for coming. Make sure you come and check us out next week. We're going to be back on YouTube and Facebook. Emmy is going to be teaching all about how to prime paper for oil painting. So make sure you check that out. It could be a fun follow-up to this lovely, lovely episode with Jimmy here. And yeah, thank you guys so much for coming tonight. Bye, everyone. Thank you, Jimmy, for coming.
You bet.
Bye.
Take care, everybody.
Okay.